level of trauma. Thank you, Marissa. I'll just open up all of these. So total cyclist fatalities in any given year. You can see it has been kind of up and down over the years, but more or less it's quite a solid, stagnant trend line there. We're not really seeing a decrease in the level of cyclist fatalities. Whereas if you look at our general road trauma, transport trauma in vehicles, we are seeing a decrease there. However, that's not extended to the cyclists. So that's one interesting takeaway. Oh yeah, I suppose that's kind of reiterated in that point there. Bike rider and vehicle driver fatalities per capita. And unsurprisingly, the bulk majority of crashes occurring, so fatal crashes, are men. Probably also represents two things. Men are generally more, tend to be cycling more on road, which is higher risk areas. They're generally cycling more just getting from A to B. And also men are typically more inclined to take risky behaviors. So it's not incredibly surprising to see men making up the majority of that trauma there. Roughly, we're still hovering around that 40 cyclist deaths per year. So it's nearly one a week kind of thing. And generally when they are occurring, they're quite public things and you hear about them in the news and think about what you can do to, what could have been stopped to prevent that. And it's only a recent case last month in Melbourne with a young man in Footscray, I'm going to say the suburb was, and yeah, riding on a shared trail and crossing over a road and being struck by a truck turning left. And it's a real opportunity for us to work within this space to reflect and think about the importance of designing safe cycling infrastructure. I mean, there's a myriad of benefits, environmental and the social aspect and better improvement in quality, but I think it can also be tied back to this factor that we are, really trying to support safe cycling infrastructure so that people can make their journeys on bicycles and they feel safe doing so. Doesn't cost their life. Today's focus is all about roundabouts. So previously we just discussed intersections and we could have put roundabouts within the intersections, but thought it merited its own topic on its own, so its own module. So today's discussion will all be about that. I should also make mention there's no Wally today. So if you're looking out for the wombat, there's no wombat today because we have another assignment instead of a quiz. For those who've already reviewed the footage from the previous module, we had the protected intersection there versus just a traditional signalized intersection. So encourage you to have a look if you haven't already done so. Similar to last module's content, we will be going through protected roundabouts, having a chat what that means, looking at some international examples, as well as Melbourne's protected roundabout. We'll go into the topic of multi-lane roundabouts and how to manage conflicts in those environments, as well as more local network settings and implementing sharrows. The Victorian government released this document many years ago, but there's still lots of good content in there. Guidance on bicycle and pedestrian treatments at roundabouts. And also another really useful reference is the Austroads report, Bicycle Safety at Roundabouts. You tend to see, or in my mind at least, whenever there's a really critical issue emerging or apparent, Austroads will release a report on that specific topic. So rather than just say cyclist safety in urban environments, it's cyclist safety at roundabouts, which I think speaks volumes to the risk level that occurs at these intersections. As always, please feel free to pop any questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep chatting all day, but we will get stuck into a protected roundabout. This is an artistic rendition of what one looks like. This has since been constructed. This is in Moray Street, which we'll have a look in more detail. But the thing you'll notice is similar to our protected intersections, we've got an offset from where the left turning traffic is and where left turning traffic is and where cyclists are crossing. So once again, you opened up sight lines. But traditionally, the way these roundabouts are constructed is we'd have cyclists entering the circulating area. And then they're either forced to claim the lane and sit in the middle, or there are designs out there which put them right on the periphery of a roundabout, which is a very bad outcome, not something that we want to be encouraging. If they are in the periphery, they become incredibly difficult to see, and there's just a really awkward confusion as to who gives who right away. If a motorist is coming through and wants to exit here, and at this point here, there's that conflict, but does the cyclist slow down to give way to the exiting vehicle, or does the vehicle have to give way? So we don't like that peripheral design. But the protected roundabout is providing an off-road facility. They're also raised on all those approaches. That's not a feature that you have to do, but it's a great feature. And they also have priority at all of these legs. So theoretically, if the cyclist wanted to turn right, they can work their way all the way around, and they don't have to stop and give way to cars, because vehicles should be slowing and giving way to them. All right, so we've got the first poll of the day, which I've got this general roundabout here, and I've got 3 cyclists listed as A, B, and C. And Marissa, if you could just open up today's poll. Sure. The question is, which cyclist is most at risk, A, B, or C? I've just seen in the chat there, we've got a question asking, would you need a give way marking for traffic exiting the roundabout and coming up to the raised crossing? And I'd go back to the, oh, actually, I'll wait for this poll to end and then I'll speak to the slide. But good question. All right, just a few more seconds. We've got a few more people waiting to complete that poll. The cyclist A, B, or C. Five more seconds. Now, we might end the poll there, Marissa, and we can share the results. So people seem to be generally quite worried about our cyclists in the position B, which is understandable because this purple vehicle has already entered the roundabouts, and there's that obvious conflict point there right away. You may have also noticed those triangles that you can see, which are representing the driver's field of vision, like this. It's kind of just representing where the driver is focused, where their eyes are trained to look. So B is out of that area within focus. So I would tend to agree that's a cyclist at risk, but I wouldn't discount any of those options because C at this point in time is completely hidden for the vehicle, yellow vehicle. So it would be possible that the purple vehicle, as it's already heading out, the yellow vehicle assumes it's good to go and heads out as well, which means there's the collision waiting for that. So I have all these lines that are now occurring everywhere. Similarly, as I mentioned, this yellow vehicle, they're really focused to the right of them. They're worried about other vehicles already circulating in the roundabout. And it's possible for them to just head straight into the roundabout and not give way at all. So not necessarily focus on what's in front of them. So bit of a trick question, because I think all of the cyclists are at risk. So give yourself a pat on the back if you answered. I think they're all relevant responses. I'll go back to the previous slide, just have a chat about give way marking at the exit to the at the exit points. And yes, you can kind of see the back of it there, the back of it there. There's give way, and there's also the pedestrians, symbolic pedestrian legs as well. Just to indicate, to further emphasize to motorists leaving that this is a pedestrian cyclist priority crossing. Good question. All right. When we look at the actual crash types that are occurring within roundabouts, we find the most predominant crash type is an entering motor vehicle versus a cyclist that's already within the roundabout. So in this little diagram, the dotted green is a cyclist and the red is the vehicle. So it's basically this idea of a motorist coming up and giving way. They're stopped. Generally, the philosophy, or sorry, the psychology behind is when we are at a roundabout, we're looking for other cars, other vehicles, right? We're not trained to look for the much smaller cyclist that may be traveling there. So that's another thing. It's this whole issue of like looking but not seeing and not really appreciating what's really happening, because our eyes are just trained on the much larger metal body that is usually our biggest concern. So we have to kind of make a conscious effort to actually look for cyclists, which can lead to these 68% of the time. That's the crash type that's occurring. Another one, I'll just go around, cyclist crossing as a pedestrian. This one is particularly relevant because as motorists kind of, if they're going to exit this leg, they tend to be speeding up. You've got your foot on the accelerator. So there's speed that can contribute to that. The other thing is the side issues. So like if you're at the start in the vehicle and entering the roundabout, your first look is any vehicles in the roundabout, and then you're heading out, you're already speeding up. And as you're speeding up, you're not necessarily looking then for a cyclist that may be heading in that direction, crossing over, or in that direction. So it's a little bit of line of sight and speed for that particular crash. This one actually caught me by surprise. Exiting motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists is around the 9% mark as well. So roughly the same as the other type as well. As a cyclist, I'm absolutely petrified of this. I get really, really worried of a vehicle exiting as I'm crossing over a leg, particularly in this diagram where it's showing multi-lane. I think that would be more common than the 9%, but that's the figure that they have analyzed. I say this because if you are a cyclist, get rid of some of these drawings, but if you are heading around and you want to just travel, let's say you want to do a right turn like this, and similar to that issue that I mentioned before, if a vehicle wants to follow you but hop off at this point, this conflict here is incredibly confusing as to who has priority. Vehicles may assume that it's their, it's their network and they get right of way all the times, but it could also be an assumption of whoever gets there first. It's just a really awkward spot. And if you also couple that with the motorist kind of needs to make that decision about this point in time, which means they need to look over their shoulder to be able to see the cyclist behind them. And it's a very, very uncomfortable situation. So I'm surprised to see that that's only 9%, but I think it's possible that this study was limited to single lane roundabouts and didn't focus on multi-lane. It also could just be the lack of reporting, and perhaps the crashes were not correctly classified from the start. The other one is just side swipe crashes within the roundabout itself. So other vehicles losing, losing their lane, just hopping into the wrong lane by accident, things like that, moving across into the bicycle lane, causing a collision. Lots of different ways a collision can occur within roundabouts. And generally, it's kind of understood that roundabouts, they do have a wonderful road safety benefit to general traffic. That does not extend to pedestrians and cyclists. So whilst it does work for some portion of the road user community, generally not as favourable for pedestrians and cyclists. Back into our protected roundabout design, when some people hear that term, this is the kind of image that they think about for a protected roundabout. This is the Hovenring in the Netherlands. It features grade separation. So rather than cyclists have to interact with this massive highway and arterial road below, they're completely grade separated and free to travel in whichever direction they want and not interact with it. So wonderful example. It's not a protected roundabout though. You just call that grade separation. Just something I wanted to show in case no one had seen that before. It's a really, really cool infrastructure treatment. A protected roundabout more looks like this, where, as mentioned before, we don't want to be encouraging cyclists to enter the circulating area. Instead, we provide a path that is off the road, separated from the road. So vehicles are traveling here, cyclists are traveling here, to separate traffic streams. Where they do cross over, it's best practice to make that a raised facility. So you are slowing down your vehicles and you're also providing priority to your vulnerable road users, which is your pedestrians and your cyclists. Might be easier to spot it out in this more 3D artistic rendition of protected roundabout, but we've got these same features of, we've got a cycling crossing facility, which is separate from our pedestrian crossing facility. So just like protected intersections, because we acknowledge the different speeds between those two vulnerable road users, if we can separate them, that's a much better outcome. We've got these yield lines or give way lines. Ours would look different within our jurisdictions, but just this idea that we need to show to traffic that they have to slow down and give way. Number 3, bicycle stop or yield lines. Yeah, this one is not applicable. This one is just confusing, so don't worry about that. Number 4, curb radius of that, just trying to get a nice sweeping bend for cyclists so they continue their journey. Not incredibly relevant. Number 5, also not incredibly relevant. Channelizing, just providing some separation between pedestrians and cyclists. The risk of putting something like that in is you've just introduced a tripping hazard, or cyclists may run into that. So I wouldn't see that as a critical aspect of it. And finally, just some warning signs or give way signage in particular. There's two kind of different ways, or there's a few different design approaches you could take with designing a protected roundabout. The first one I'm going to use is in Assen in the Netherlands, and this involves quite a significant footprint, as I'm sure you can see. But it's got all of those design features that we've just talked about. So if I am a cyclist on the bottom left here and I wanted to turn right, there's actually 2 ways I can do this, but I could do it, go along here, like this and continue my journey there or on that side if that's where I wanted it. This is actually also bi-directional, so I could also do this, which obviously shortens my journey quite a bit. So that's pretty exciting. But you'll see the reason that we're so positive about this or so encouraging this type of design is, well, we're not bringing cyclists into the circulating area. They have their own space completely. Where if this was the movement of a vehicle, they'd be forced to slow and give way to pedestrians and cyclists before they have to enter the roundabout, where again, they slow and give way to any other motorists that may be within that roundabout. And then upon exit, they have to slow and give way one more time to give way to any pedestrians and cyclists before completing their journey. So already I can hear some of you who have worked within congestion or, you know, about level of service for different transport modes, understand that this slowing and stopping for general traffic could have implications for their expectations of the route. And I think that is completely valid. And I think if you were implementing these treatments, you would see an poorer performance for general traffic, as they will have to slow more often and give way to pedestrians and cyclists. But once again, it comes back to, if we are implementing treatments on our strategic cycling networks or our principal bike networks, the areas where we have designated that these are the most significantly important routes within our area, within our network for the cycling community, we can't then let them down at the roundabout and just be like, that's just a weak spot, you have to deal with it, because we won't be able to attract more and more people onto bicycles. Lots of people identify roundabouts as their least favorite part of cycling. They don't feel comfortable either claiming the lane, or they don't feel comfortable merging in with or being around traffic. So we need to keep in mind, if the objective is cycling safety, then that can come at the disadvantagement of other road users like general traffic. Here's how things look out on the ground. So as I mentioned, this is a type of design where if you had quite a large footprint and you were able to provide quite an offset between your crossing points and where the circulating area is. The next example is a lot more constrained in space. This one's outside Rotterdam, and it, as you can see, it's got a circular bicycle path that is running on the periphery of the roundabout, but it is still separated. There are some little concrete curb and channel that provides that degree of separation. So it really does reduce the risk of motorists entering the bicycle lane. But you can see it's not quite that expansive footprint that I showed before, where there's a lot more space between the circulating area and where cyclists are. So this is a tighter footprint. And I think it might show this how it looks out on the ground, so you've got a bit of appreciation. And I might even bring in a vehicle so we can just see how things will look. Here's our little Porsche driver coming in. And let's say, for instance, this Porsche wanted to exit the roundabout. I'm not sure why I picked the Porsche. I've got nothing against Porsches, but say this Porsche wanted to exit the roundabout, head out here. Because we don't have the same offset that we had in the design previously, we're still in that situation where it's actually very, very difficult for that driver to be able to see the cyclist that's behind them, because this cyclist's also traveling in this motion, and perhaps they want to travel over there. So it's difficult for that driver to be able to safely, acknowledge the presence of any cyclists within the area and be able to stop and give way for them. So where it gets tighter and tighter and tighter to the periphery of the roundabout, you're increasing the risk of drivers being unable to see cyclists and therefore increasing the risk of that collision. Any questions there, Marissa?
No questions at the moment, Max. If anyone has any questions, please pop them in. Be happy to read them out to Max for you.
Cool. All right, just getting a bit dry in my throat. All right, so showing this third example, which is actually a little bit of a blend of the first two. It's where you've got slightly bigger footprint, but you've still maintained one nice radius curve for cyclists. So this one's actually in Cambridge, in the United Kingdom. And lots of funny line marking that they use over there, but see, it's got the same design philosophy. We want to ensure that cyclists aren't forced to enter the circulating area. They've got their own space, which they do. And where they are crossing at all these locations, they have priority as well. But you can see by providing this extra room for vehicles to exit, so I'll just draw the vehicle exiting. The vehicle exits there, it's a lot easier for them to be able to see cyclists crossing in front of them, as opposed to the example before. So I'll just reiterate, the closer you're bringing that bicycle lane to the periphery of the roundabout, the more and more risk you bring in reducing sight lines for vehicles spotting a cyclist that could be passing in front of them. So if you do have that ability to provide the offset, that's strongly encouraged. Marissa.
We do have a question, Max. What if there is a SCC intersecting with priority traffic route or priority bus route?
Ooh, okay. So that's a perfect example where you have competing demands. So if you were just looking at the SCC, the Strategic Cycling Corridor, and you're like, yeah, I can do gold standard along there because that's the strategic objectives of that corridor. And we recognize that at a local level, at a state level, it's really important to get cyclists traveling through there safely and make it as attractive as possible. But if that's crossing over a road, which could be an arterial road, that it's really important for people to move through there and heavy vehicles and the like that. Depending on the size and capacity of whatever this movement corridor there, you could be looking at grade separation. I would say that that would be, you know, really good outcome for cyclists. And when we think in our jurisdictions that grade separation is, you know, few and far between, but really in these European nations that I keep showing, it's like, that's exactly what they would do. Like, there's no questions about it. Like, they would never accept the risk of cyclists crossing these major arterials. Even with the use of signalized intersections and things like that, they'd be much more likely just to provide grade separation. But I mean, it needs to be considered on a case by case. I can't really provide a blanket uniform response because you can't really build overpasses at every single intersection either. So it's a good question. Keep them coming.
Thanks, Max. And just further to that, do you support separation in those situations?
Depending on how it's been designed, yes, I think it can work, but it's, yeah, if it's not going to be comfortable for the cyclist community to use, then they won't use it. They'll find ways around it. They'll go whatever is more attractive for them. So thinking of things like steep grades and, you know, just the facility itself, whether there's enough width, whether the handrails are going to create snagging risks and things like that. So, I mean, one example that springs to mind is in Denmark, I'm going to say, I think it's called the Snake Bridge. I might have to look this up after it. But it's, yeah, basically a beautiful overhead structure that kind of runs over roads and main streets and things like that, and just provides that separation. And actually, I might also touch on, while we're talking about it, the Valorway structure that's currently being built here in Melbourne as part of a new tunneling project. So that's going to be an elevated bicycle and also pedestrian overpass structure that's completely separated from vehicles. So there was never entertained the idea that we'll try and put them next to or provide some degree of separation from live traffic. It's always going to be a separate facility on a separate structure. So particularly when you are working in those larger project domains, there's a real possibility to influence grade separation.
Great, thanks. And we just have a comment from Len. Also handy to have some vehicle storage on exit, so traffic and roundabout is not held up.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I didn't even mention that. Thanks, Len. Let's give a prize to Len there. Yeah, so if the vehicles exiting there, they got a place to queue and wait and prop, and then not block up the rest of the roundabout to help with congestion.
Thanks,
so,
Max.
That's good. It's actually perfectly illustrated in this diagram here, but you can see in that photo, hopefully that's a bit clearer, how the driver would be in a much better position to see cyclists crossing over in front of them, as opposed if the cyclist was like creeping up right behind them in that awkward position. So better the offset, bigger the offset you can apply there, yeah, more positive the outcome will likely be. I should also caveat that with, if you push the offset too far away, two things might happen. You might get cyclists that don't want to travel that extra distance to then cross over. So cyclists may pick their own path. The other thing is, if you put the crossing point too far away, as motorists exit, they build up speed, build up speed, build up speed, and they'll be less likely to then slow and give way again for crossing pedestrians. So there really is a bit of a mix and match of exactly the perfect length that you would be aiming for. Don't want it too close, don't want it too far. Generally, one propped vehicle is being considered, you know, what should be strived for, so like 6 meters or something like that. But yeah, just something else to consider. We've got this video of the roundabouts, protected roundabout working in action, which hopefully is going to load for you all, if my clicker works. So hopefully that's playing for you, and you can see lots of cycling traffic. Generally, traffic are quite understanding. They're slowing, giving way. Even the bus there is, you know, just waiting for their turn before they get let through. This protected roundabout is also bi-directional. So you'll see on the bottom right kind of quadrant, although there's no quadrants of a roundabout, that section of the roundabout is bi-directional. So you can travel in both directions, which makes it a lot quicker if you wanted to do a left-hand turn in this instance. You don't have to go all the way around the roundabout. So just thought I'd show you how things are working within the real world and give you a bit of confidence that these things can work if they are being installed. So have a quick chat about Melbourne's protected roundabouts. Left-hand side of the screen is what it looked like before, and then right-hand how things currently look. The shape that we went for was an octagon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, octagon. Which is a little, some people don't like the shape as a cyclist because you've got these sharp-ish bends where, you know, if you are a cyclist, you do like sweeping bends just to be able to maintain speed. Personally, not that big of a deal. I think it's fine. It's not like you have to slow down to a walking pace to be able to navigate that, but you do have to slow down, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I might just go to the next slide because it's a bigger picture. The other interesting thing about this site that I mentioned in the protected intersections as well is whenever the cycle path crosses over the ped path, you can see the zebra crossing is extended. Yeah, that one's under the tree. But... So in other words, if you're a pedestrian coming along, your priority starts at the bicycle path. So cyclists are forced to slow and give way to you. And once again, just to reiterate, it's a lot easier to communicate that to road users than to have it the other way around of pedestrians need to give way to cyclists within this area. So I think that's a really sensible idea. Really good feature within this design, not shown in the others, is the raised nature of the crossing points as well. So building wombat crossings. The raised feature slows down vehicles, so it ensures that they are, traveling at speeds that they're more likely to be able to stop for emergencies if someone does cross in front of them. And also, if a collision were to occur, it's much more likely that the severity of that crash outcome would be survivable. So making them raised is just another really well thought out, well self-system aligned as well. I did have a question for the group about this one, which is, could you think of any disadvantages for cyclists at this particular roundabout, or at the other roundabouts as well? But we'll just, because I've got this photo up, I'll just talk to this one. Any disadvantages? So I've talked about all the wonderful safety benefits. So maybe this one isn't safety related, but could you think of any disadvantages for a cyclist at the roundabout?
We have a couple comments, Max, while people are popping in their answers there. Noticed a lot less vehicular movement. Oh, it's a tongue twister, that one. As opposed to bikes and pedestrians on the video that you showed there.
Yeah, true. Yep.
And Chris says they go to the trouble of building a nice roundabout but leave a dooring risk on the approaches.
Yeah, that's right. Dooring. Reverse dooring. Oh, not reverse dooring, but reversing out into a bicycle lane. That's very risky as well. But yeah, very relevant.
Lots of people popping their answers in now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, okay, great. Looks like lots of people are thinking about the same thing, which is, yeah, performing a right turn movement is actually more circuitous. So if you're a cyclist and using the protected roundabout, you've got this journey, which may seem inconsequential on an aerial. When you're out there on the ground and you just want to get from A to B, that can be a real pain. So you might have cyclists that just want to do this. Which is what has happened in this photo here. We actually did an evaluation of this particular site and analysed, I suppose, the safety aspects of it, how many cyclists were using the protected facility and how many were doing what this fellow was doing and just using the road network. So I mentioned no helmet. The cyclists heading straight through, 90% use the protected feature. The cyclists performing a right-hand turn, around that 77% mark. So in other words, 23% of cyclists felt like, nah, I'll take my chances and go into the roundabout to turn right. Depending on who you ask, that's either a success or a failure. I'm of the opinion that we are still trying to attract a broader range of cyclists and not just trying to encourage more of a cyclist that we see here that feels comfortable in just cycling wherever they want to. So by providing the facility that allows for that extra separation and provides that extra safety, we are still providing for a broader range of skills. And I see that as a great success. So 77%, some people think that should be 100%, but I don't think we'll ever get that. I think cyclists will always kind of pick their own risks and, pick their own path based on it. If, for whatever reason, you did want to completely funnel cyclists into the protected roundabout section, you really could. So this is what's currently out there on one of the legs. Use bike lane at roundabout with a little arrow there. Well, it's not incredibly difficult to ignore that and just do whatever you want. Similarly, if you were riding along here, it's not all that challenging to ride in front of vehicles and take that. So if, as part of your project, you thought, no, this is all about protected roundabouts and we need cyclists to use the off-road facility, there's no reason to say you couldn't extend that separation all the way up to the roundabout. And then you've got cyclists on the off-road facility there. It's still not impossible for a cyclist to use the circulating area, but much less likely. So just something else to keep in mind. All right, multi-lane roundabouts. Things get a little bit trickier in these environments. I'll move that little banner out of the way. This is in a rural environment. It's coming into a relatively big township. And as you can see, the main thoroughfare, which is east-west, has got bicycle lanes, but nothing for the north-south legs. So there's no north-south connection there. There was the original idea with this roundabout was if you did want to turn right, they provided this space kind of off-road here to be able to pause and wait and then cross over. However, it wasn't fully realized as there's no like curb ramps there. So that's all just splitter islands. So you'd have to actually mount the curb again, which is obviously not a great outcome. So it's really not encouraging cyclists to turn right at all, which means cyclists that do want to perform that may be forced to put themselves in this position here and get in the right lane and travel like a vehicle in this high-speed environment, or in a much worse outcome, use the periphery and cut across that way, which would be, as you could imagine, quite a stressful thing to be doing as a cyclist. So this is not a very good example of what to do in multi-lane roundabouts. Here's how it looks on the ground. Another kind of peculiar thing is you can see that it's like there was this off-road facility for cyclists that then becomes an on-road facility at the roundabout. And then there's nothing there until you get to the little splitter island, and then nothing again until you get to the end. It's also really weird how it kind of narrows as you get closer and closer to the roundabout, just really raising the stress level for a cyclist. But it's certainly not a very accommodating environment for cyclists and would really only suit the very confident. For those looking at the signals there, it's got nothing to do with cyclists. It's the level crossing, the rail there. That goes red when there's a train coming, just to make sure people don't travel too fast. Unfortunately, nothing to do with cyclists. Similar environment. This one's in Canberra. Different way of approaching cyclist crossing. So we'll focus on the right-hand side of the screen, and you may, a little bit difficult to see, but we've got a on-road bicycle lane, which as we approach the intersection, it actually moves to an off-road facility. Cyclists are then carried away from the roundabout, provided that offset that I've been talking about. There's some hold rails and things like that, They don't have priority to cross here. They have to wait, give way to traffic, cross over. And if they wanted to do that again, they could cross over here and then, continue their journey up there. But this idea of physical separation in multi-lane roundabouts is absolutely key. It's critical. It's a must. So in the local environments, we're a little bit more flexible. We can even have cyclists riding in the middle of a roundabout through the use of sharrows and encourage them into the circulating area. But for multi-lane roundabouts with higher speeds, it's not a feasible solution. We really want to be providing these off-road facilities. Here's how this just looks like out on the ground. So you can see cyclists, once again, you could interpret that as being, corralled into that off-road facility, but doesn't necessarily exclude a cyclist who does feel more comfortable to claim the lane and head right. For those that have worked within this space, you may have come across these designs before, which is proposing to put a bicycle lane on the periphery, something that I've been saying not to do this whole time, and that has been superseded. So if you are still referring to that, make sure you're going to the Austroads Guides, Road Design Part 4B, and having a look at what they currently recommend, because what they're currently recommending is let's get cyclists off-road and, provide the hold rails, and they can cross when they have, the time to do so. Here's an example of how a design may be influenced by the network that you are crossing. So in this example, the east-west road is, let's just say, a highway. It's quite a high movement corridor. It's quite important. Whereas the north-south is more local. Could just be residential access or access to a developer land kind of thing. So they're all off-road facilities for these cycling, but I want to focus on the actual crossing points. So we have a look at the northern side. Because we acknowledge this is a local network and the movement of vehicles is not really that important at a strategic level, so at a statewide level. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide priority to cyclists. So if you are a vehicle that's turning left into this development, you have to slow down, give way to cyclists and pedestrians, and then continue on your way. Similarly, if you're exiting. That design approach has changed for the much more important highway. It's much more important to keep general traffic movement here. So instead, we're going to say, install grab rails or hold rails for cyclists at all crossing points. So we're still maintaining the priority for general traffic on that movement function corridor and making cyclists give way. So it's an example of where your design may be dependent on what are the what are the road network strategic objectives for each of the corridors that you're crossing over. Pretty neat little example. All right, local roundabouts. It's that a day. Our final one, which is what is wrong with this photo. Got a final confused cyclist there. So if you want to pop into the chat any suggestions as what you think may be wrong with this photo. Also, if anyone knows where that photo was taken.
Lots of great answers coming through there, Max.
Thank you, Marissa. Yes. All right, let's have a look. So, end of bike lane. Dooring on the other side. Yeah, well done. Very well spotted. Didn't pick up on that. No warning to motorists that bikes could be merging. Bike lane ends. No shallow. Bad sight lines. All of those spot on. I suppose we'll give a prize out to the first one that said bike lane ends there. Very abrupt way to finish a bike lane, and a very, very common way as well. It's very, very common to see designers being unaware of how to treat cyclists within these situations. And so they've just ended the cycle facility and, well, that's it. We've ended the bike lane, so it's not our problem. We're not expecting cyclists through the roundabout. Doesn't quite work like that. So, yeah, I agree with all those points. I think it helps solidify. We're having this conversation last time about sharrows and do they actually do anything? This is probably an example of where, you know, a sharrow in this instance can at least give cyclists a bit of confidence that they are permitted to ride in the general traffic lane and they're not forced to kind of get off the carriageway and leave. So yeah, it like whenever you get into pavement markings and paint in general, you're clearly not mitigating the risk to its fullest extent, but I would like to think that sharrows in this environment would be an improvement. This is in Alphen Road, Brisbane Street, Lawrence Street in Launceston. It's called the Peanut Roundabout. It's shaped like this. And there's the Senate Gardens. So here's an example of how the sharrows could be implemented in these local environments. So as you remember before, when we are mixing traffic, we want to be going 30 to 40 kilometre per hour range. So in a lot of our networks where we have these, we may be looking at reducing our speeds just to accommodate cyclists safely claiming the traffic lane, which I'm not against. I think that would be a good outcome for cyclists and general road users as well. So the sharrows are used, you know, quite commonly, depending on what jurisdiction you are in. This particular example I wanted to share because I think it's much better practice if we are to install vertical deflection for the speed hump. If we can move that back to before the merge point, so vehicles come up, they hit the speed hump, they slow down, and then cyclists are merging in front of them, much, much better outcome, as opposed to cyclists just merging and then everyone has to slow down. Because you don't really need the cyclists to be slowing down at that point. They're likely already traveling at lower speeds approaching the roundabout. So that would be something to take on board if you are working within local area or local governments. Another similar example of just the local area traffic management treatment being applied and lots of sharrows. But yeah, just to reiterate, low speeds, low traffic volumes. Generally, we're considering it appropriate to be installing sharrows, including sharrows within the roundabout itself. So you can put the sharrows in the middle of the, you can put the sharrow symbols all the way through the middle of the roundabout as well, just to really emphasize that this is an area to be shared and it's not just for general traffic. Right. That is the content for the roundabouts, but I've still got a few more slides to go through, and I also want to run through the assignment. So keep the questions coming. I just wanted to run through some of the, I suppose, more enlightening advertising campaigns I've come across over the years, but looking out for cyclists, the importance of that, and having these posters around your offices or, you know, including this in any education programs that you might run with schools or anything like that could be a good way to support it. Generally, humor is a good way for people to remember messages. Obviously, that one's not funny, but the Red Cup project was something that was trending a few years ago on Twitter. That's where people went and actually placed red cups at the edge of their bicycle lane and then came back a couple hours later just to see how their red cups are faring. And invariably, it did not take long to see that they had been crushed and destroyed. Some people also put tomatoes and apples in their cups just to really indicate how vulnerable cyclists are if you are just providing a little white line to protect cyclists. It's incredibly common to see vehicles using that space as their traffic lane, which is very uncomfortable for cyclists and also has safety implications. So quite an interesting campaign that was running a few years ago. Another one that I love to share is this fellow in New York who was trying to bargain with their local government authority to install a protected cycle lane, but they wouldn't do it. So he just went out there and bought 50 plungers and glued them on the road, which is just amazing effort. You've got to really, got to commend that. That's pretty good. No, actually, I shouldn't. We don't commend vandalism, but it's really taking matters into your own hand when you're doing that. Unfortunately, it did not work as council did rip the plungers up and no protected bicycle lane has been installed at this location, which is a shame. So made for a little gag, but unfortunately didn't lead to action. This is just another advertising campaign in Scotland. Feel free to have a watch of it after today's session. See Cyclist Think Horse. This one actually caused quite a bit of upset from the general community for two reasons. One, the cyclist wasn't wearing a helmet. It's not a legal requirement within the UK to wear a helmet, but it was frowned upon regardless. The other thing was a lot of people were upset that she wasn't riding much closer to the gutter. It only lasted like 2 or 3 months on tally before this got taken off air because people were pretty upset with what they were seeing. So there still really is, quite a awkward sentiment towards cyclists sometimes that, people think cyclists want full access to the road and, they want to take control of everything and things like that. But yeah, it's very much trying to get away from our car-centric cities. We've always been focused on, for decades, focused on the 4 wheels and providing for the easiest transport for them. But, perhaps we need to acknowledge that that's not the best thing for our communities and certainly not for the safety of our vulnerable road users. We do have a final video, 360-degree video to watch at the end of today's module. So first example is traveling along Moray Street at those protected roundabouts. The second example is using one of those roundabouts where there's a bicycle lane in the periphery, one that I do not recommend at all. And it's a really good experience to watch online to see what it feels like and have a vehicle come up behind you and not really be aware of who's going to give way to who. So a really, really good example. So I encourage you to get onto that. I have set aside some time just to get stuck into our assignments. So on the LMS, you'll see that module 4 video that I was just talking about. You'll also see module 4 assignment. If you click on this link here, it will take you to a Word document. The Word document will look like this. The instructions for your final assignment is we require you to select a site that has existing cycling facilities. We want you to visit the site. You don't have to ride a bike on the site, but we do want you to actually be boots on the ground there. So we recommend you pick a site that is close to home, close to the office, Maybe you go and pick up the kids from soccer or whatever it is, and there happens to be a bike lane there. That's fine. You know, whatever is convenient for you. We just want to see you, you know, take a photo of an actual real site that you have visited. Preferably if you can do a selfie, that'd be great. Answer the questions listed below. So we've got a few pretty, few questions for you to answer. Step 4 is where things get a bit spicy. So we encourage participants to provide their responses in any format that you want. If you want to design up using AutoCAD or MicroStation, this is what the existing conditions are. This is what I want to do. Go for it. If you want to make a PowerPoint poster about what the conditions are and what you want to do, that's fine as well. We really just encourage a bit of innovation or a bit of creativity in this section, because we've found that some participants just love doing that. Some people like the opportunity just to be able to express themselves in whichever way they can. We've had in the past people write poems, people have written songs, someone made an animation, someone did like, you know, you put all the drawings next to each other on page after page after page and you flip through them. I don't know what that's called, but they did one of them. Amazing stuff. Anyway, you can do whatever you like. If you also just want to write a Word document and have this completed, you're welcome to do that too. We just encourage you to do whatever feels right for you and then upload that submission to the LMS. So just like you did with the Module 2 assignment, upload to the LMS, please. If I scroll down, all we need from you is insert your name, where that is located, just so we can do a quick street view and check how things look on the ground. The questions you need to answer in any form that you want. What infrastructure currently exists? And please refer back to our previous modules to make sure you're using the correct terminology. What are the hazards for the cyclists? You can be as broad as you like. You can, you know, mention your own anecdotal experience living in the area. That's fine. We just want you to capture the hazards. And the reason that I mentioned we will review things via Google Maps, because if there are hazards that we think you have missed that would have been worth mentioning, we will include that within our feedback. So if you think that this can just be like, oh yeah, that's the site, that's the hazard, job done. You may be 100% correct, but we want to challenge you to start thinking, you know, what are the hazards there as a cyclist? So try and get a better appreciation for cyclist experience. Final question, what could be installed to better improve safety for cyclists? So not going to limit you with any budget constraints. I'm not going to limit you with any political constraints or anything like that. This is a bit of a carte blanche. You can build whatever you believe will improve safety for cyclists. So hopefully that makes things a little bit easier for you. The assignment, we have provided a deadline of next Thursday. So you've got opportunity, I suppose, this weekend just to sort out a site, take a photo. In terms of how long you should allocate for this assignment, I would say if this is taking any more than a couple hours, it's taking too long. So please don't spend too long on this. Like, we don't really require massive in-depth, you know, reports on these types of things. We just want to make sure you've understood the content that has been presented and you're able to identify the hazards and what could be recommended to improve that. So yeah, if it's taking you hours, please just get in touch and we'll try and corral you into a different path. The other final thing I was going to mention is under resources in reference documents. This isn't, is this, oh, this is the right one. Sorry, let me just, yeah, it is. So there's a folder there called, file there called Cycling 360 Footage Examples, which I'll just open up. And we have provided this for all participants, which is basically different cycling infrastructure treatments that we've recorded using the 360-degree footage. So if ever in the future you are looking at designing a protected intersection, for instance, you could have a flick at this little resource and you can click on, oh, what is that again? And that will just give you hopefully a bit of a reminder of what that looks like. And also to make it a little bit clearer as to our impression of these facilities, we've included a little bit of an emoji legend. So big smile is best practice, and the person screaming there with the blue face is a please don't do that. So if you're going to watch any of them, maybe just watch that one, because it's probably a reminder of what not to do, and really showcases how stressful cycling can be. But yeah, just different examples of different cycling infrastructure treatments that hopefully will provide you a little bit of information as you go forward and use these skills in your next project. But I want to thank you all for joining the session, and it has been wonderful to hear all your own anecdotes and insights and how you see things and view different things. We've left this time intentionally at the end of this module just to give you time to complete your previous module assignment or to get started on the next one. So feel free to use this time for that. But I didn't mention how to get the course certificate as well. Do you want to mention that, or do you want to have a chat through that, Marissa?
Yeah, I can have a chat through that. So once you have completed your coursework, you've uploaded your assignments, we will get them graded. Our markers will grade, or Max will grade it. So once you've completed your assignments, your tasks, there is a feedback form that, and I'll share my screen just so I can show you. There will be a feedback form. That working? Can you see my screen? Can you see that? You see that, Max? Yeah. So you've got your module 4. Once you've completed that, you've got your feedback and certificate. If you complete your course feedback, it's just a really quick 2-minute feedback sheet just on the training. Once you do that, you will be able to download your certificate here. Yeah, so that should be available to you once you've completed those tasks.
That's right. And we send out a hard copy of the certificate as well. And any of the prizes that you've won along the way will come in the mail with your certificate.
Yes, absolutely. So look out for them if you have won a prize. Thank you, everyone, for your participation over the couple of weeks. It's been fantastic seeing all your interaction, and we look forward to receiving your submissions as well, seeing your creativity.
Wonderful. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And yeah, feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. Take care.
Absolutely. Have a great day.